Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to call the Public Safety Committee meeting to order. I chair this along with Joe Boykin, Mr. Darby, and Mr. Middleton are not here tonight, but the chairman sits as well. So do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of April 20th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No? All right, they pass. We have an exciting update from EMS, and as a point of personal privilege, just wanted to say we recently celebrated 50 years of emergency medical services service to the Charleston community. They do a fantastic job. We are so proud of the services they provide, and we look forward to hearing from you, Mr. Abrams.
It is. Thank you, Mrs. Honeycutt. I want to recognize the EMS folk in the building. Thank you guys so much for being here to support us. They're the team that makes everything happen. Great team we work with. This is just going to be a brief update on some funds that we received from council 2.5 years ago when we made the request. If you forgive me, I borrowed from Maslow's hierarchy of needs to kind of illustrate EMS hierarchy of needs. Starting with the base of funding, everything we do is funding. That is the lifeline of what we do in public service and public safety. We've been really good about trying to expand where our funding sources come from, not just from council, but also grant funding. And we've also, grant funding and direct funding. So back in March 5th, 2001, we came before this council asking for some help in the funding aspects because we needed more staff, more resources. Council responded very generously and in kind to our request. You gave us everything we needed. We at the time went back and worked with other departments, human resources and procurement, DCAs, and we got a good plan together with those additional resources. At that time, we had 126 EMTs and paramedics employed, 17 vacancies. We asked council at the time to increase our FTEs by 44 personnel, which gave us an immediate vacancy rate of 61 personnel. We also sought at that point to have an increase in pay for our personnel, which is what we worked with various departments here to get there. Our fleet status at the time, 2.5 years ago, was only 37 ambulances in the fleet. We asked to increase that by 4 up to 41 ambulances in the fleet. The total funding we estimated was about $6.3 million. Some other issues we have with the funding, we're investing back into our infrastructure to really embed ourselves back into the communities that we serve. With that, we've started to meet on the Isaiah project, which we're excited about because that should unify various EMS locations into one central hub for the North Charleston area for the most part. We're going to retire Medic 12 station on Dorchester Road when that happens. Kiowa Island Public Safety Complex, we have a vision for that to be a hub for EMS deployment, so we should have a greater imprint back on the Johns Island area with that. In St. Andrews Fire, we've actually partnered with them as well to have an EMS fire station in West Ashley. That'll give us an EMS presence back over there with a station. And of course, we all know Edisto Island. We've spent a lot of time and investment in trying to make sure we are serving that community as well. On top of the funding, of course, we need people and we need the tools. So the people and the tools, we've done some great initiatives, I think, and I'm proud of the team who've come up with some innovative ideas. We've done an EMS academy where we're actually training people from the street, paying them to go to be educated, and be out there deployed as EMTs. Our first class had a 100% pass rate of 16 personnel. Chief Bialik is in the audience here. He's basically been the person putting the grease to the wheels on that project. We also have the Student Leader Internship Program. We just hired our first EMT out of that program. We're working on diversity, work-life balance with different shifts and such for the employees to really retain personnel. So in 2021, we had 126 field personnel. Now we have 178. So we've had a net gain of over 50 personnel to help better serve the community. The tools, we've actually gone up to 56 ambulances now in the budget. COVID kind of threw us a couple of wrenches. And again, council came back and provided us with all the funding that we needed to get those ambulances up. Equipment, we're going to ultrasounds, mechanical ventilators, Lucas devices. These are things that have improved medical care and have given us more latitude with adding medications and better treatment. So we're going to continue innovating, and it's challenging because we're trying to innovate and beat the path down. We're not following any other EMS agencies in the country. I think they're following us with some of the stuff that we're doing in the field. That takes a lot of time and work. Strategy and planning is what we've really put on to really innovate better. We've incorporated the BLS ambulances in the field to add more ambulances, even though we don't have all paramedics. That's been enormously successful. In fact, I think other counties around us are following in that lead. We're about 2 or 3 years ahead of them on that progress. The admin team, we've actually gone from 4 people in the admin team to 10. That's our budget, that's our finance, that's our compliance with procurement. So we're making sure that our books are in order when we're actually doing all this stuff, because it's a lot of funding. They're also looking at grants and other funding sources for us. We're also looking at community engagement, of course. Planning, we've gone from about 15, 16 peak ambulances up to about 24 to 26. So that's a significant improvement. We've also been able to, with those extra people, we've actually been able to get back into the community with Eddystone, McClellanville, and Kiowa by dedicating ambulances into those areas. We've done that now for 2 years. That means when they get a call, they're not out of service and they're sent back to those areas. They're not stuck to run any other calls. As our staffing increases, we're also doing that now for Mount Pleasant. We're also got that for Ravenel. So that should be the next anchor units, as we call them, to really embed ourselves in those communities, to really make sure that we're out there for those folks. And of course, we're looking at going to beach staffing hopefully this summer, so that as the beaches get more populated, we have the staffing to put an ambulance out there for them as well. So a lot of great ideas to add diversity for our workforce and also improve our community engagement. You can see this, you guys each have a bag in front of you. That's called the Narcan Leave Behind program. Again, that's one of Chief Bialik's programs that has been successful. We're the first EMS service in the state to do this. This is basically when we go to opiate overdose, we can actually leave this bag with the family, and it has instructions, it has resources with Deotis in there, so it's a Narcan Leave Behind kit to really try to help bridge the gap with recovery, not just with our EMS treatment. And at this level in our EMS hierarchy of needs, we're really looking at creating that access to health care now. We saw that with COVID. What can we do to reach out with COVID, get shots to people? We're doing this with community medicine. We're doing this now with the Narcan Leave Behind program. We really want to try to make our citizens healthier, however we can participate in that. So Narcan Leave Behind, weekly community outreach events with Chief Benton here as the outreach deputy chief. He's done a great job. You see us out there everywhere in the community. So the next stage, of course, the final stage is reflecting on what are we doing with the monies we have, the funding we have, and making sure that every dollar that we have in our current budget is used wisely. So we're looking at how can we cut any waste in our budget? How can we really maximize our effectiveness with the funds that we have? And they're generous funds, but that's our obligation to the citizens, is to make sure that their tax dollars are being well used for the service of EMS in this community. And well, apparently I'm talking above my, outside of my updates there. So, but with that, I'll answer any questions you may have, and that's pretty much a summary update of what we've done with our funding that we received 2.5 years ago with County Council, and we are very gracious for your generosity and your vision to make sure that public safety is a priority, and we take this job seriously, and we know you as well.
Thank you so much. Any members of the committee or council have any questions or comments about this?
Chief, I just want to tell you how much we appreciate everything you and your staff have done and how invaluable the services y'all provide to the county are, and just thank you very much for doing such a great job.
Thank you, sir.
Yep, Mr. Sass.
I'd like to echo that, and I think it's really great that you've built up the staff, the personnel, and I'm sure our retention's better too from all the other things we've done as well.
Yes, sir.
We are partners in this. I mean, this is one of the most important things that we do, and we certainly appreciate what y'all do. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, sir.
Just want to echo what everybody said. Thank you so much. You never know how important y'all are until somebody needs you. And, you know, I've had the opportunity to, when my parents was in their latter stage in illness, the professional services that y'all rendered. And so, again, I thank you. Public safety has always been a part of me and a part of my heart. And I really thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Again, as a point of personal privilege, I want to mention that EMS responded just last week to an incident involving one of my children, and not knowing who that person was, it was the same level of professionalism that you all treat every other member of this community. And Charleston County is so proud to have you at our side. It is the chief responsibility we have to serve the public in their greatest moment of need. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
And that ends the public safety meeting.
Thank you. Special Housing Committee meeting. Ms. Honeycutt?
That would be me as well. Welcome to our Special Housing Committee meeting, in which I chair. And again, Reverend Middleton, who's not here, is on the committee, Mr. Kabrowski, Mr. Werman, and the chair Chairman Sass, who sits on all committees. We'll begin the meeting with the approval of minutes of August 17th. Do I have a motion? Mr. Sass? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, minutes approved. The next item on the agenda is the 995 Morrison Drive update, and I believe we all have some information in front of us to follow along.
Can I get one?
Oh, you need one?
Yes.
There you go.
No, you take, I'll get one from down there, because somebody didn't show up, so just give me theirs.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Here you go.
okay, thank you, Jenny.
All right, we'll turn it over to our consultants. Or actually, is Mr. Ant going to start? Turn it over to you, Mr. Ant.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Honeycutt. Just as a reminder, council gave staff or the administrator some directives that included 995 and the pre-development process that you all expected us to begin in order to achieve your directives. Development Strategies was the consultant that we hired that developed our Housing Our Future plan, and they subsequently won the award for the 995 planning. And so here we have their staff. Justin, of course, will be speaking, but if the rest of you would stand up, because we spent the entire day together, Irene and Bobby and Catherine and Matt and Justin, they've spent yesterday, today, and some tomorrow in our community. So this presentation will be the end of phase one. There are 3 phases in the contract, and this is an update for you all on that phase 1.
Great. Thank you, Christine, and council members. It's a real pleasure to be back in Charleston. It's good to see some of you again and to meet some of you for the first time and on a new project as well. We're really excited about giving you this update tonight. We're going to just kind of quickly walk through this. It's going to sound like a lot of content, and we've done a lot of work, but I'm going to try and kind of get through it quickly to allow you all to ask questions if you have them. But to really kind of put a foundation to this, I want to do a real quick set of introductions, really to just kind of impress upon you who we have on this team that is doing this really important work for you all. Do a quick project recap, because I know that all of you weren't here at the time when we've sort of started some of these conversations, so we just want to kind of do a reset and put that on the table. Talk a little bit about our process overview. As Christine said, we're wrapping up phase 1 now and want to give you some context of that. And then to really show you, to illustrate, I guess, some of the detailed work and the conversations that we've been having and talk to you all about next steps. So I'm not going to belabor this slide much, other than to say that we've assembled a team that's really going to be able to dive into all facets of the 995 Morrison pre-development planning process. On the development strategy side, as well as the other consultants that we've brought on the team. We've got urban planners, urban designers, folks that have housing policy experience, real estate development experience, engineering, retail and business entrepreneurship, and as I said, planning, architecture, and design to kind of complement this. And so we've got the folks here that are going to be able to answer the questions throughout this process for you all as it relates to the site. So there's the site. I don't need to kind of introduce this too much, other than, for those of you that in the audience that may not be real familiar with 995 Morrison, we're down here on the peninsula between Meeting and Morrison Streets. We've got a little less than 8 acres that we're working with, and it's a really exciting site that is really an opportunity to have a development that can really advance some housing goals, especially on the back of the Housing Our Future plan that the county did. So, advancing housing goals, it's part of the Laurel Island PUD, but it's its own site and it's its own development site. There are community assets. There's a lot of development happening around this site, as well as, investments in things like the Low Country Rapid Transit. And so this is well positioned to leverage those assets and become its own kind of catalyst for the area, and we're very excited about this. As Christine said, the charge that that came out of the council decision in December really focused on 3 things. One, our task at that time was to provide a high-level land value assessment to the council under different scenarios, thinking about maximizing, market rate opportunities, maximizing affordable unit opportunities, finding some blend of market rate and affordable, mixed use, mixed income. Ultimately, that's the direction that the council chose, that they would like to see more planning and a development that really focuses on mixed use, mixed income, optimizing the value of the property, and finding opportunities to maximize the residential that's there and find opportunities for affordable housing. Another piece of that was engaging in the pre-development planning process. That's what we're here doing right now. And the idea of engaging in a pre-development planning process is, no, you're not the developers, but you're the landowners. So what kind of process can we create to give you all as much information that you need, that when you go out for an RFQ, a request for qualifications, or a request for proposals from developers, that you know as much as they do. And a lot of times that doesn't always happen. A lot of times the developers are holding more cards than you are, and they're coming at you and you need to respond. In this instance, we're providing a lot of due diligence for you as the landowner before you get to that step. And so that's kind of the nuts and bolts, or the essence, I guess, of the process that we're doing here. And it's also going to allow us to get to a greater level of detail. One of the things that we did when we were in front of you last time, it was very much a high-level, order of magnitude understanding of the possibilities, and we're narrowing that down through this process. The third element, the MOU with the City of Charleston Housing Authority, I'm just going to mention it because it's there. It was part of that directive, but we really see this as more of an implementation tool and something that will actually happen more as we're putting the pieces together for implementation. Really, it's the first two that are kind of important for our pre-development planning process. Let's see. I think, just wanting to kind of maybe elaborate again, that scenario 3A, mixed income, mixed use. There's housing, there's retail, supportive services. It's housing for all income ranges. So it will be from market rate housing down to affordable housing. One of the things that this will do is understand what level of affordability, how will it impact what a developer might be responding to, and the ability to make that development pencil out. Talking about workforce housing, dedicated affordable housing, all of that is in the mix right now, and that is part of understanding what those levels are and how it can impact development. I mentioned this, I've said the phrase, pre-development planning services. And what does that mean? Well, it really is kind of the due diligence part of the process. Developers are doing a lot of this same work when they go into a development project. We are doing it for you, to arm you and to have you have the information before they do. So it's understanding the site conditions, the constraints, what's going on the ground, understanding the mix of development, and the feasibility, and so that you all have a sense that when a developer says to you, it pencils out, it doesn't pencil out. What does that mean? We're going to give you that information. It's really putting things together. There's going to be two outcomes from this process. One is going to be what we're calling a development book, and it's really a document that's going to collect all of that due diligence, all of that work that we're doing. And then it's going to, along with that, go with an RFQ, a request for qualifications, so that we're going to go out with that RFQ and we're going to solicit that. We being you all, we together you're going to solicit that, and it's going to go with a development book, and you're going to tell developers, here's what we're looking for. Not specifically, we're not telling the developer point by point, but we're giving them rails, the limits of what we want to see on that site. And you'll get from that process. And with that, kind of hopefully much more qualified and informed proposals that you will be evaluating down the road. This is our process. As Christine said, we're wrapping up phase one, the analysis phase, and we've been having a lot of conversations with other subject matter experts, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We've been doing a lot of analysis, document review and work from our desks, and then we've been doing a whole lot more of that today as well with this trip. And so we're going to be wrapping that up with this presentation. We've got a few more conversations we need to have in the next couple of weeks with some other subject matter experts. But I think by then we'll have the questions answered that we need to start developing some concepts that you all will see in January. We'll talk about next steps as we move on. I just want to highlight our goal right now is to have really a preferred alternative and the development book to review and to talk about in March or April of next year, of this spring. So that's the end date here, and we'll see you again in January. So as I said, we've been doing a lot of conversations. We've been doing a lot of analysis as we're going through this first phase. I just wanted to throw up some names here to show you all who we're talking to. The folks on this list will play various roles. Some of them have a regulatory role. The City of Charleston's planning and zoning, right? Will have a role and a say in if there's any need to change the zoning or to understand the zoning as the development process happens. They've got a regulatory review process there, so they need to be involved in helping us understand where we're starting and where we might go. There's other folks here that are also investing in infrastructure that's impacting this. The Low Country Rapid Transit, we met with the COG to understand transit. The bus rapid transit, what are the opportunities for connectivity and access as it relates to our site and coming into this area? We've got, as I said, a mixed use component. And so there is a need to really understand the retail entrepreneur opportunities that might come from that commercial aspect of this development. So we've been meeting with the Chamber of Commerce and local businesses and part of that local business, small business ecosystem. And then, we've been meeting with the Housing Authority, the City of Charleston's Housing Authority. We'll be meeting with the county's Housing Authority to understand what role they might play as formal partners in delivering the affordable housing component of this mixed income, mixed use development that we'd like to see. So we've been doing a lot of that on the site side and maybe on the more technical side. We've been doing a lot of document review. There's been a lot of work and conversations that have happened on this site over the years. And so we've been sifting through that and jumping off of those documents, jumping off of that work where it's appropriate. But then also just understanding the neighborhood context, the peninsula context, the site context. I'll go into more of that in just a minute, but there's been a lot of physical work to go along with the community conversations works. And we put this slide together to really kind of, I think, say two things here. One is, yes, we are here to talk about 995 Morrison and the opportunities and challenges that exist with developing the site, but we can't do that in a vacuum of not understanding what's going on with the neighborhood and the district around it. And so, when we think about area assets that are there that we can leverage while we're thinking about the uses that we want on this site, what do we not have to do because they're already in the area that we can leverage and connect to? And so you can see, the Singleton Park, there's other affordable housing projects around. As I mentioned, the transit and the bus rapid transit is going to be in proximity that's going to really impact kind of the marketability of this site as an intense residential area. But we also do think very much about the site considerations. Some of these are challenges, some of these are assets, some of these are things we just need to know and work through, and you can see the list here. Market conditions, regulatory conditions, those are some of the conversations we're having with development professionals and folks from city planning, as I said. Bicycle and pedestrian connectivity is going to be very important. But I just highlight the top two that are probably the biggest considerations, perhaps biggest challenges, or we're still working through them of what it really means. But it's the Cool Blow Bridge. It's the extension of Cool Blow through the site to connect to Laurel Island. There are decisions that have been made. There are things that we need to explore of what does that bridge being there mean, or what does the possibility of the bridge not being there mean? How do we address that? There's a phrase here that some of you may not be familiar with, but it's the LIMWA. It's the limits of moderate wave activity. But think of it as it's the tidal flooding that happens in this area, the encroachment of marshland. These are two environmental issues that are going to also, I think, significantly impact the site. But interestingly enough, as we were walking around today, thinking about how can we turn that challenge into an opportunity as we're thinking about how we lay things out on the site. And so that's why we kind of changed it from challenges to considerations. There are some opportunities here, I think, with all of these on the list. So that's kind of the work that we've been doing. I wanted to throw this slide up here before I get to the next 3 slides as just a way to say, wow, Justin, there's a lot going on. We're having a lot of conversations. We're doing a lot of analysis. How are we wrapping our arms around all of this? And how are we wrapping our arms around this for you all? One of the ways that we like to think about this and to frame this discussion is to think about development and this pre-development planning process with these lenses of what we call the 4 points of feasibility. As you're thinking about a development project, these are the 4 areas that we think about, how successful it is in each one of these will determine the success of the overall project. And so quickly to run through those, market support, that's the market. What's going on with the housing, with affordable housing, with retail, and how can that drive the opportunity of that? The economic feasibility, think of that as just the development feasibility of the project. What does it take? Costs of construction, have gone through the roof in recent years. Interest rates are changing. How does that all impact a developer's ability to actually deliver the product that you all want to see on this site? Also, what are the incentives? And what are the opportunities for partnerships and having other people contribute to this project that could offset that? And so it's really the cost and value proposition of development. The site and the place is probably what a lot of people focus on because it's the stuff you see. It's the land, it's the stuff that's around the land, it's the neighborhood context, it's the marshland encroachment, you name it. It's the site and the place that's, really thinking about what that is and how does the site lay out and connect to the surrounding neighborhoods? How can we enhance the quality of life of the surrounding neighborhoods and not just think of this in isolation of Morrison? A lot of that comes into that site and place and livability context that you're putting this project in. On the policy and goals side, sometimes that's what encapsulates land use regulations. And there's land use policy and regulations that come into play here. If there's a need for a zone change, it's a public, it's a political process. It's out there in the public. Policy goals like integrating affordable housing. That is a policy decision that has been made that is going to shape what this project looks like. And so making sure that we understand and answer as many questions within these areas as possible is what we're trying to accomplish with this and how we will frame this when we're giving you all the information through the development book. So the next 3 slides are just, I want to go through them quickly. It's just to show you some of the issues that are impacting some of the different facets that we see. First one is just thinking about the concept development. How does the site lay out? What is the density of the site? What is the characteristic? What is the look and feel? What kind of uses are we thinking about? Obviously, the cool blow bridge and the environmental constraints of the LIMWA and the marshland encroachment are going to impact the layout and the housing market, the retail market, the marketability and the connectivity around the site are going to impact how we lay things out and what it looks like and what it feels like to the folks that live there as well as the experiencing it from the neighborhood. I mentioned the cost feasibility aspect of it and thinking about land use policy and making sure that we have the questions as best as we can answered from that regulatory and land use standpoint because uncertainty there can really impact the timing and development process for a developer. So to the extent that we can answer these questions and for them, it reduces that time and that risk. Once we've done the planning and the concepts, you start thinking about what impacts what comes out of the ground. So these are issues impacting construction, again, the environmental, the bridge, utility, maybe utility relocation, maybe the inability to relocate. Utilities. Implications of the PUD. I mentioned it's tied to the Laurel Island PUD, but it's its own site. So, making sure that we understand how that will impact construction. And then an element that we are really happy to have Bobby Boone from And Access here to talk about with our development folks is really understanding the potential of the issues that are impacting storefront retail, because we think that could be a real enhancement and a real opportunity so that it's not just residential. You said mixed use, mixed income. And so really having the conversations to understand what's going on there from a small business retail storefront perspective, from a market standpoint, the ecosystem supports and the support for entrepreneurs that are out there, and the barriers that exist, and how we might use this as an opportunity to create maybe something new that doesn't exist right now on the retail and entrepreneur front. And that is me setting the table for you all for the work that we've done and where we're going and the issues that we see. As I said, over the next week or two, we're wrapping up that analysis phase with just a few more conversations that we weren't able to have while we were in town this week. And then we're going to be emerging into November, December, and January into what we're calling the development concepts phase. And so the next time we see you, we will have a variety of concepts that will address these challenges that we're talking about, leverage these assets that we're talking about, and begin to show you some of the trade-offs, because nothing is just simply straightforward, right? Thinking about those 4 points of feasibility and how they compete and complement with one another, that's what's going to be shown in with these concepts. Some of it's going to be physical with layout. Some of it's going to be about the development mix and the affordability mix. And we're going to start to get that to a level where you all can start to see different options, understand the trade-offs of those options, and give us some direction to eventually kind of coalesce that into the development book to give, as I said, some of these rails, parameters for developers to respond to. And so we'll see you at the end of January for that. And so I'm happy to, I've got the whole team's here ready to answer questions. We can jump back to other slides if you'd like us to. But thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you so much. Members of council, we'll start with the committee. Anybody have any comments, questions to raise? All right, Mr. Werman.
Chairman, Chairwoman, I thank you again, Mr. Carney, and everyone who's put so much work into this. And was certainly very encouraged by a lot of what you had to say there. And I think my understanding, though, is like that big conversation about trade-offs, which, there's all sort of different sliding scales as far as I can tell. And I think what you're saying is that that's correct. That conversation is not happening today. That conversation is happening in January. Is that basically what I'm understanding?
Correct.
Okay. Well, then I won't have as much to ask, but I did want to just ask, so in that conversation, I can imagine, I guess, some of the stuff we're going to talk about. When you talk about different concepts, is that going to be considering sort of different, I guess, deal or ownership structures? I'm in particular, I'm hearkening back to the question I had for you last year about, are we considering a ground lease? Are we going to be able to evaluate the trade-offs of a ground lease, that sort of thing?
Yes. The short answer is yes. I think it is. So our understanding right now is that if there's a desire that we've been thinking about what that development feasibility aspect looks like, the cost and value piece, and that cost piece is impacted by whether it's just a sale outright or a land lease, right, from a developer. It's also, conversations that we're having, say, with the housing authority and what role they might play in some sort of deal structure like that, where maybe the county has conveyed it to a developer and perhaps the housing authority as a partner to get to leverage some of the affordability pieces. We'll be able to understand that much better in the next 3 months, and that'll be part of that conversation in January.
Well, that's certainly encouraging. I am only vaguely aware that there are different structures like that. I couldn't speak to understanding them, but I do think, to the extent that that is one of the sort of levers that we can be pulling, I would want us to be doing so. One more question, and I guess, this kind of goes to the broader issue of our Housing Our Future plan. One of the priorities we identified, I don't know if it was stated as land banking, but I don't know if that was the exact phrasing we used, but as I sort of conceptualized it, we've got sort of our gap financing going, and I certainly appreciate all the help that y'all have had in getting that off the ground and our own staff. It seems to me that projects like 995 Morrison have a unique ability to address, obviously the location. I mean, you said it. And so this is a 1 of 9 type comment, but I would hope that as we go through this process, we're kind of developing sort of a template that maybe the county can use in the future should, I don't know if the county would acquire land or if we would be working with folks who do acquire land, whatever that winds up looking like. I guess that's sort of my question, and I don't know if you have an answer for it, but is this a repeatable process, or do we need to kind of go and do this, do we gain any efficiency the next time around, or the third time around, or the fourth time around?
So I will say yes.
Okay.
And it really depends, I think, on the scale of what those opportunities are. We've seen, I think it's the scale of the future opportunities, how much planning has been done around those future opportunities. So if the land bank opportunity in a scenario where I'm just a hypothetical, right? But if the land bank opportunity is already within what I would call like a bus rapid transit station area planning effort, right? So they've identified the route, they've identified station areas, and somebody's already done kind of the community planning, the neighborhood planning around that, and you have a much more defined idea of what that opportunity is because the planning's been done. I think you could take a lot of this framework. I think you could take a lot of the thinking and the framework that we will have put into this and apply some of that into this instance, because a lot of that due diligence is being done in those planning area studies in that particular context. I think, I could envision, if there are multiple parcels to the land bank, if it's a larger area that you're wanting to consolidate. Again, it's sort of the level at which the planning and the conversations have happened around those opportunities when you take them. And if it's an instance where it's just the land's available and you've purchased it, or it became part of the tax sale and you have it already, and you really don't know much about it, but you want to maximally leverage it again, maybe a similar process like that this is what you go through. I hope that's a satisfactory answer, but it really is sort of case specific. And I can imagine, because we talked about some land bank opportunities along the rapid transit line, and I think those become maybe a little bit more streamlined than this, because there's already been community conversation, land use and regulatory conversations that a developer might more easily fit into than what we have here.
Right, and my apologies. I mean, that's one of the goals I think we identified, that we have not kind of spend as much time, putting the bricks and building that out. So it's a tough question to answer, because it's a very flimsy one to ask. So I apologize for that. But
No
thank you
worries.
again for everything you presented today, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
All right. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Of course, thank you for all your hard work.
You bet.
You did a great job. Just a few questions. You mentioned it's intense residential. What kind of numbers do you imagine there in the end?
I would say that that's part of what we're refining right now. I'm trying to remember right now in the high level effort that we did. Did we have 800, 1,200 units? So in kind of that high level feasibility scenario, thinking about what we did, it was very much at a high level, and we needed to make a lot of assumptions in order to arrive at numbers to give you all kind of that order of magnitude value. I think when I say intense uses, I just mean from the standpoint of when you look at the development that's there and in the context of the neighborhood, there's some lower density in some areas, some higher in others, and how can we take advantage of that to maximize the number of units on the site?
the reason I ask that,
Yeah.
so much of what we deal with here are quality of lives and building new roads and infrastructure, whether that supports development that comes. And I've worked in Peninsula Charleston for many decades now. And I look on the map and you have Foundry Point, the Charleston Tech Center, the Atlantic on the Romney. And I know Morrison Drive and Meeting Street, I mean, they're not going to be widened any. And to put 800 or 1,200 units there with all these other things going on, what analysis has been done on the impact of the traffic flow for people who are going to work and live there? Does the current roadways, because again, so much of what we do is trying to play catch-up on roadways and whether it's 526 or all over to kind of catch up with the traffic. Is there a sense that, are we getting ahead of ourselves and the amount of people being put in there where the roadways won't support?
Well, I will answer your question this way, that we also need to remember that this is one piece of the overall PUD,
Sure.
and that there's development on Laurel Island that's going to all impact this. There's redevelopment projects that quite literally
point
that has
view.
happened from when we were here
Right.
last year to now have just sprouted up directly in this vicinity. And so, yeah, I think there are conversations that need to be had at the city level to make sure that development is and the infrastructure is there to address it. I don't think that we're there at that point yet for this, other than perhaps the traffic study that was done for the broader Laurel Island PUD,
And
which envisioned several, a lot of units on.
the other question with tidal flooding and
Yeah.
the increase in sea level rise.
Right.
We're right on the water here.
Yep.
And there's nothing between you and the Atlantic Ocean and the harbor, and having lived through Hugo, that's also
Yep.
a worry about the implications of the flooding, the tidal flooding, the sea
Yep.
level rise, and the exposure to
Yeah.
have more intense hurricanes coming. And
Absolutely, and now that I have, that's why we have Seaman Whiteside on our team, and they're an engineer that is, actively developing in the peninsula and very much aware of those kind of environmental impacts, and not just now impacts, but future impacts, and how can we maybe build in infrastructure pieces that can address that and maybe to some extent future-proof that is very much part of our conversation. Building that into a project like this is also something that increases costs and impacts feasibility. And again, that's kind of some of those trade-offs that I think we're talking about. And if we really want to dive into that environmental sustainability answer, we know it's impacting other points of feasibility. Let's understand that and be able to let you all know what that could look like.
all right, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other members of the committee or full council? Nobody? Well, again, Mr. Carney, thank you so much. You've done, you and your team have done a lot of work on this. We really appreciate it. The value you bring in making us informed on the seller side really is incredible value to us. So thank you for that work. We look forward to seeing you in January.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you for the time.
All right. And that ends our Special Housing Committee meeting.
Thank you. Administration Policy Rules Committee, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This committee consists of Joe Boykin, Jenny Cost Honeycutt, and Reverend Milton, who's not here, and of course our chairman. We have two items on the agenda. The first is the approval of minutes of October the 5th, 2023. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
Any deletions, additions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. Item number 2, it says for discussion, is to amend Rule 4.2 quorum of committees, and also 2B, enacting electronic meeting procedures during emergency. So I'm going to start with council members who are on this committee. If you have any conversation, just raise your hand and I'll see you. Anybody would like to start? Ms. Honeycutt?
Yes, so with regard to the quorum of committees, it makes perfect sense so that we do have a quorum in the event folks are not able to be here. I think that makes sense. But with respect to the electronic meeting procedures, we had this discussion, and I have, again, thought a lot about this, and since having that meeting, we have run into scenarios where members simply have not been able to physically be here, but participated remotely, were engaged and paying attention. My biggest concern in this scenario is having 4 of us out at a time and everybody or half of us participating remotely and what that would look like. I am tending to lean toward allowing the exception that you had proposed last time, which outside of this emergency discussion that we're having, actually have a policy that would allow for remote attendance. So I just wanted to put that out there since this is simply for discussion. I definitely think we need something so that we can come in an emergency situation, assemble electronically, but I think we need to revisit that as well.
Before I go to anybody else, Ms. Honeycutt, I was talking to a few members while we were in the back coming in and out, and I too told them, I'm glad there's some kind of, conversation on with us to have anything, and I would suggest 2 meetings a year, once every 6 months. If you are committed to doing one, let's say today, then you would have to wait 6 months before you can participate in the other. I don't know how that's going to go along with council members, and then if it works out good, we can always amend in the future. But I do think it's important to have something because in the case of an emergency or in case of something coming up, we can't delay it. If that person is visually, via Zoom or any kind of other else, meaning YouTube, we can actually do that. Mr. Sass, Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. Yeah, I think that we have all sort of gravitated towards some sort of an accommodation for individuals who can't be here. They would still be able to visit by Zoom, but they would only have 2 meetings that they could vote. And I think we kind of got a little bit of a mix-up here because this particular item, I think, gives us the ability to call a meeting when we can't get here. And so that's what actually 2B is, but I think we're talking about 2C now, which we got to add. Okay? We got to add 2C to that, which is allowing somebody to be able to vote from remotely. And but I think the item that we're talking about is 2B, which is a procedure that would allow us to call for a meeting and without having been here to do it.
Yes. That could appear case of a hurricane or something.
And I think that we need to do that. We could have an earthquake or something and nobody could get here, or some kind of problem, nobody could get here or nobody's in town. But we all keep in touch, so we would keep in touch with staff and with our administrator, and we'd be able to call that meeting, and I think that's something very important that we need. So I'd like to move that. I'd like to move all 3 of those items forward.
All right, so from the committee members who's on the committee, can we add 2C by unanimous consent? And then that way we would be within the rules. So without objection, we would add 2C to this with unanimous consent from committee members. Okay?
Does there need to be a formal motion to that, add this to 2C? Because I will move to add
Yes.
2C.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Second it. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so 2C has been added to the agenda, by unanimous consent. It allows us to move this forward. Okay? All right. Anybody else?
Thank you, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Chairman. I like Mr. Sass, I was concerned about this, but I'm coming around to it a little bit. And Mr. Pryor, whatever number we settle on, I think I can get there. But I will say I watched the school board meeting just for entertainment the other night to see if any fireworks went off, and they had 2 or 3 members that were on Zoom, and it was a mess. It was very clunky and clumsy. So I want to make sure, and that's on our clerk and our leadership team, Mr. Tootin, unfortunately, that we make sure, and Mr. Sass too, that we keep order when people are away, that people are recognized, and we give chance to people that are not here physically to get in what they want to get in, and we're not talking over each other, because that's what they were doing at the district meeting. It was real messy, but I can get there.
You wouldn't expect nothing better from that, right? Mr. Dobrowski?
Made some excellent points, and also that many of us, emergencies can happen to any of us at any time. And for having one or two a year, I think that's reasonable. I just ask, would that apply? Would it be a limit as to how many members could do that at one meeting? Or is it this, because it makes sense with one person or two, but is it, in that context, would there be a limit as to how many people could vote by proxy like that at one time? Or is there no limit?
I don't think it'd be a limit. It all depends on the emergency, as I don't
I mean,
think.
I understand for the
Yeah, yeah.
emergency, but for non-emergency meetings,
You only gonna get two, once every 6 months. So if you
Yeah.
use that up in the first 6 months, you won't be able to do another one until the next 6 months.
Okay.
And so, if it just happens, 6 people out at one time, God forbid, I don't think that'll happen. But, I mean, I understand what you're trying to say. We don't want to have everybody not coming to the meeting and then participating via Zoom. But the chairman will, whoever that is, right now it's Mr. Sass, so we pass this, before January, then the chairman will be in control, and he will say, okay, hey, we can move this item to another meeting, or he can allow them to vote.
thank you.
All right, Mr. Darby?
Mr. Pryor?
Yes, sir.
As chairman of this committee, please, sir, in the future, admonish Mr. Moody not to criticize my bosses, sir. At least not in front of my face like that. They are my bosses.
Mr. Darby?
Just did it before you did.
School board, I'm looking out for you.
He
Love you very much.
kicked me
points,
under
brownie
the table and asked me to do that,
So what do we want to do? Do we want to just move this on to Tuesday?
Yeah, Mr. Pryor, I'll make a motion for 2A, B, and C, and that language can come back to us on
Let me
Tuesday.
check with the clerk to see.
Sure, so in accordance with your rules of council, this is just for discussion.
Okay.
It'll come back to admin policy on the 30th.
Okay.
And y'all can vote on it at that time, and I'll work in concert with the county attorney to get something written for
Thank
item
you.
2C that y'all added.
All right, anything else to come before this committee? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's back to you.
Thank you, sir. Our next meeting is Public Works. Mr. Moody?
Call this Planning Public Works Committee meeting to order. All members of council are voting members. First item is the minutes.
Move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor.
Second.
Second, Ms. Honeycutt. Any changes, deletions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item
Move
2.
for approval, A, B, and C.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pryor. Mr. Boykin, any discussion or questions? I'm going to make a quick comment on 2C. Mr. Adams, we've talked about this, and I want to make sure that the town of Ravenel understands clearly that this is their baby now. That we're out of this. If they want to accept this into their budget and working order, then that's theirs to have. Thank you. All in favor of items A through C, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. That's it, Mr. Sass.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. That was a nice, quick meeting. I like it.
We aim to please.
Welcome to our Finance Committee meeting. Everyone is a member. First item is
Move for approval.
approval of minutes. Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Mr. Moody. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 2,
Move for
resolution.
approval.
Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Mr. Moody. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 3, consent agenda.
For consent agenda, approval A through J.
Mr. Pryor, and seconded by Mr. Moody, items 3A through 3J. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Greenbelt items, presentation, transportation, sales tax update. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council, for the opportunity to update you on the Greenbelt program stats. And what I'm going to be updating you on incorporates everything that's happened in the program since I was last providing you this update on March 16th. So it does reflect the winter 23 awards. 202 total projects have been approved by you all at this point, with more of those being fee simple than conservation easements, and slightly more rural than urban projects. We look at acreage. We're closing in on the 25,000 acre mark for total acres protected through Greenbelt funding. And you can see in the next section that conservation easements account for over 2/3 of the acreage, as well as rural has significantly more acreage than urban at 22,000 plus. Total funds awarded, $140.8 million, bulk of those going to fee simple. And you can see the breakdown between rural and urban, and a small amount for minor improvements. And as a reminder, those are for our beach communities. They're able to use those funds just for boardwalks, trails, items like that. Then our average cost per acre, just over $5,500. As expected, fee simple projects are more expensive typically than conservation easement projects, and the urban area land prices are higher than in the rural area. We look at our match provided. Overall, we've generated over $200 million in matching funds. So that's $1.44 for every Greenbelt dollar spent. And that is divided roughly equally between conservation easements and fee simple projects, and pretty close there on rural and urban as well. 44%, or almost 12,000 acres, have some degree of public access, either currently or planned. And 88% of our funding, or $154 million, has gone towards public access projects. Our minority lands funding is $57.5 million. That represents 40% of all overall program funding. And acreage at 3,713 acres, that's about 15% of total Greenbelt acres. Currently, we have over $25.5 million available for allocation for our rural and urban projects, 20.3 in rural and 5.2 in urban. And of course, any approvals of funding for the current cycle would be deducted from these amounts. Our goals update, we continue to have exceeded our goals in national forest acres, wetlands, and county parks. And we're still working on rural lands, urban lands, and the corridor projects. And since our last meeting, we have had 8 different projects closed. That list is on the left-hand side, and 12 projects that are still pending closing, with 5 of those being Mount Pleasant Way multi-use path projects. Didn't list those all here, but Town of Mount Pleasant is helping us get towards our corridor goal. We have a cycle that just opened. Our FY24 winter application cycle opened back on October 30th. That'll close on January 26th. And then looking ahead to next year, summer cycle will open June 3rd and close on July 26th. And I did want to just note that we have implemented in partnership with IT a new online application system. It's made it much more streamlined, I think, for our applicants, and will certainly be more efficient for staff as we process those applications. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I think you're doing a great job. That's an impressive list of projects we closed already this year and got more to get done. And I'm excited to read about the ones that are coming up online.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next item would be item
Chairman.
4B. Yes, sir.
Move for approval on 4B through 4I.
Second.
All right, sir. Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Ms. Honeycutt. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all very much for those. Finance Director items.
Move for approval A through F.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Ms. Honeycutt. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Council member items. Elected officials' compensation.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
I can take this. I brought it forward and taken the mantle from Mr. Pryor and in previous years. Just to refresh council's memory, we had a discussion, I guess, a few weeks ago about number one, that currently elected officials cannot have their pay or salaries or raises or anything messed with. Okay, so that's off the table. So the idea and the concern voiced by a majority of this council was that newly elected people coming behind, especially elected officials who've been there for a long time and their salaries are very high, newly elected people coming in and commanding that same salary just because that's what the predecessor had. We have, the clerk sent out, I think, to everybody earlier today, a spreadsheet that shows what all the elected officials presently make. There were some classifications that I think, Ms. Altenheim, that I wanted to ask you about. There were 4 of our elected officials were elected 3 categories. Can you speak to that briefly, and maybe also go ahead and touch elected 4 as well?
So the classifications that you're seeing on the spreadsheet come out of a compensation study. It's a consultant takes a look at the position, and based on the duties of the position, classifies the position. It's the same thing that happens with all positions in Charleston County. And so that's why you're seeing the different classifications on those various positions. And the structure of the classifications, the 1, 2, 3, 4, is similar to what we see across all positions at the county.
To follow up on that, what are the pay ranges for elected 3 and elected 4, if you have that handy?
Yes, I do. So on an elected 3, the minimum pay for the range is $106,579. Your maximum on that range is $172,764. For your elected 4, your minimum is $125,777, and your maximum is $203,902. And then for the elected 5, the minimum is $148,408, with a maximum of $240,593.
Ms. Altenheim, as with the HR directorate under your directorate, would it be your opinion or the HR's opinion that any changes, anything we do here, maybe stay in that directorate? I think we had talked about last time Beaufort County has codified theirs an ordinance, which requires 3 readings. Either way, I mean, whenever you skin the cat, but by having it in the HR bucket, it makes, if we do any changes, it makes this council's ability to change and modify in the future easier.
Correct. So the policy setting the pay for elected officials is currently in the HR policy manual. It's a big manual that has all of our HR policies in it. What was presented related to what Beaufort County does is actually in an ordinance. The policy in the HR policy manual can be changed by council action with a single meeting. If you're talking about putting this into an ordinance, if you want to change something, then you're looking at 3 readings of an ordinance to get that done.
Ms. Altenheim, and I'm sorry I'm monopolizing, but anyway, y'all jump in as you need to. Beaufort County, though, did something interesting. They had a reelection, I call it a kicker. So whatever their salary is stays the same through their term. People sign up for a salary, they know what they're running for, so there's really no reason to come back and ask for something else. But if they are reelected, there's some bump. Did I read that correctly from Beaufort County?
Yes, that's correct. So Beaufort County has set a minimum salary for each of the elected official positions, and that's what a newly elected, non-incumbent official would make when they come into the position. And then at a 4-year point, if they're reelected, when they start their new term, they get a 5% pay increase. And I will say, this is what Charleston County's policy was before July of 2015. Mm-hmm. We did the same thing. Mm-hmm.
Mentioned that to me at some point. I'm not sure how or when or why we got away from that, but it's...
Some more conservative folks came on council and changed it.
Hey, now, maybe.
That's all I'm going to say.
Does anybody have any questions? This is dialogue. I've got a motion I want to make, but I'd like to hear some
My
dialogue.
only question would be the filing fee for these folks. Would a newly elected person pay the same filing fee as an incumbent? Because I know most of these offices' filing fee is based on the incumbent that's in office, right, and their salary, or it's just a regular filing fee?
So taking a look at the form that we have to provide to the State Election Commission, which is used to determine what the filing fee is.
Okay.
It offers the option of naming what the minimum salary is for the position.
Okay.
And so the filing fee, if that's what we reported to them, would be based on that minimum salary.
Good, because I wouldn't want, somebody to come in and pay the filing fee as somebody who's been there. So actually, the incumbent now will only pay the minimum like somebody new coming in, because, the incumbent has built up longevity, has built up COLAs, And so, you know, a new person coming in would have to acquire that. If they defeat that incumbent, after that incumbent retires, they would start at the minimum filing fee.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
Mr. Kowalski.
But Chairman Moody, I want to thank you very much for bringing this up. I thought you made some excellent points. I certainly would agree with this.
A little bit, please.
Sure, I just have a throat thing going on. I want to thank Chairman Moody for bringing this up, and I'm in agreement with it. I just ask, I know the clarification with salary, I know in the private, like when I pay my employees or I get paid, whatever my benefits or anything, they come out of my salary. But as I understand it, so when you list these salaries, whatever, that's only partial of what their compensation is, correct? Because all the benefits, the retirement, the health insurance, everything is in addition to what we're seeing here. So if anybody listening would know that. And isn't that about 40%, I think, approximately?
Benefits are running, a little bit over that.
42.
Yeah.
Whatever we're putting here, the salary, so when we look at this, that they're also getting 42%, which is, I mean, you're dealing with, say, 174,000 or 140,000, that's a lot of extra money they're getting.
Yep.
I just wanted to clarify that, because it's contradictory when you're in the, outside of the public world.
It's the unseen, right?
It all comes out of what your salary is. Thank you.
Foreman.
Yeah, and I appreciate this, Councilman Moody. I was dancing around with this idea the last time we talked about it, and I still am sort of uncomfortable, you know, maybe appreciate those conservative folks coming in on 2015, because it just, there's something about having an election where the incumbent is entitled to a higher salary than the challenger that makes me uncomfortable. I mean, and if we're talking about like COLA increases, I get that it's not likely to be something that really changes the incentive structure, but you do have a situation where like the incentives to run and challenge this person are less than the incentives to, you know, maintain the seat. I also still am just kind of uncomfortable with the sort of public perception angle of that, and you know, it's almost as if we're sort of endorsing that person's experience by increasing that pay. And I know everyone doesn't have to agree with that. That's just sort of where I'm at with it. I just would prefer a system where, you know, the position is the position, and you know, it's a public official elected position, and these are more sort of career positions than ours are. I recognize that, but I do think there is still sort of that public aspect to it, and so that's just where my sort of comfort level is. And I would also say that I think, to the extent that some of our salaries are too low right now, you know, when we first had this discussion, I was sort of under the impression that we'd gotten way ahead of, you know, sort of what the midpoint turned out to be, and that does not appear to be the case. It appears that, you know, we're actually below the midpoint on a lot of these. So I don't know that I would be in a position to support the Beaufort County plan, I guess, at this point.
Mr. Kowalski.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you just need to speak in the microphone.
This is a point of clarification. I didn't pick up on it, and I agree somewhat. I agree with capping it, but what would be the increase? I'm not necessarily on board with increasing somebody's salary the longer they're there. I agree if somebody runs for something, what it is initially, nobody's forcing them to run again.
Right.
I would be in favor of the motion, but without an increase over time, that it would just stay there. That would be my expectations. I don't think that the length of time somebody is there should be an increase, because nobody's forcing any public official to run. And it shouldn't be a discrepancy of, if somebody's running, they should get the same when they win as the person holding it. That's just my feeling.
I don't think it's an increase, Mr. Grabowski, because here's what I think. For the first 4 years, they capped at, let's say, for instance, 150 grand. They're capped at 150 grand. But if they decide to run again, they would get a 5% increase, you know, for, you know, the following 4. And so I don't think you're stymieing them, it's just like us on council. We can't give ourselves a raise. One time, when I first came on council, we would get a cost of living adjustment like everybody else, and I think it was built into 3% every year, I think it was, like everybody else. But then we decided, the majority of us that says no, can we, instead of doing that, we would have to bring it before the public, and you wouldn't get that raise until the very next election. And whether you got elected or not, it would go to the new person. And so I think what Mr. Moody is trying to do, and I've said this along, all before, you're not trying to discourage folks from running, but we're trying to say it would be like a first-year student coming out of college, it says, I'm a surgeon, and then you got somebody who's done it for 20, 25 years requiring the same price. And so I think that's what we are trying to look at. And if that person beats the incumbent and stays in office for 10, 15 years, then their salary would go up with cost of living and, and longevity as well. But I think what Mr. Moody was saying is the filing fee would be the same for everybody. But if you be there, just say, for instance, somebody's making 250 grand right now. A new person comes in and starts at 250 grand. Well, with the incentives every year and incentives over a period of time, it's going to keep going up and up and up. And so I think what we are trying to do is just be realistic and says, okay, here's the starting point. If you defeat this person, this will be the starting point. But I will think a lot of people will be waiting in line, in some of these positions, $150,000, $160,000.
Ms. Halton, we've had some COLA mentioned, cost of living adjustments mentioned up here. Elected officials would have the ability to share in those as other employees do, I believe. Is that correct?
The current policy it says that an elected official will receive a COLA if the county gives a COLA, if county council does a COLA.
Chairman, I would approve them getting the increase for the benefits as opposed from the salary, if that's possible.
Yeah, and maybe I've gotten off track once again with this discussion because, it seems to me for the record, I don't have any opposition to having a COLA. I just don't know that I don't like the idea of having a bump for reelection. So, the idea that we would, if what is being discussed and on the table is getting some of these salaries up to the midpoint, standardizing some of this, and, perhaps putting in some sort of incremental increase so that we don't have to come back and do it every 2 years, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm just not comfortable with sort of the compensation for experience, just because I think that's sort of up to the voters. So,
Mr. Pryor.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to move forward, eliminate the 5% increase, just the cost of living, the COLA every county employees. Let's just eliminate the 5% every 4 years. Okay? Because they don't get it right now anyway. Is that correct?
Brantley had a motion he was going to make.
The current policy gives the elected official a percentage increase every year based on what the middle merit increase is for county employees.
So
we have we have 3 levels of merit, and they get the middle one each year.
All right, so then they're getting something, so the 5% it would be an extra bonus. So I would ask, I know you got a motion, but you can't make the motion. If you say it, I'll make it if it's what I want, because the chairman and committee, oh no, this is on finance. I'm sorry. Mr. Kabasha got me kind of when he said chairman. But, the 5% plus what they're getting now, it makes sense when our regular employees don't get that benefit.
So I think my thinking was that the newly elected, and this goes for every office. So think about the chain. Okay, it's going to take some years for this whole process to come into play. Okay, we have some older electeds who may or may not be around much longer. We have some younger electeds who may be here for a number of years. So it's going to take some time for this process to be fully engaged with all elected officials. Okay, but it starts, in my opinion, it starts now, and the 5% kicker that I call would only be for the newly electeds. Okay, that's the way I think to Mr. Worman's point, to get their income up as they continue to win and move and continue to serve the citizens. It would not be The currently elected officials, nothing changes with their compensation right now. We can't do that according to legal.
But to Mr. Kabrowski and Mr. Wareman's point too, and if they are getting this raise every year, like Ms. Corinne just stated right now, you know, I mean, if you get elected 4 years from now and you don't want, and you says, well, I want 5%, you got two choices: either you don't run, you know, or you take what what's on the plate now. So I think the 5% needs to be eliminated.
I guess how would you get the newly elected people income up?
If they stay long enough, the income will come up because they're getting a raise every year anyway.
No.
Well, based on the compensation.
The benefits, right?
The
benefits. We don't get COLAs every year.
You know, and then some of these folks also get increases from the state as well because the state pays part of their salary.
Right.
Well, let's set aside for a moment. I want to make sure I want to make sure we've got two buckets here. We've got currently elected and newly elected. Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's just take the existing elected out because we cannot touch them. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if we set a level for any newly elected and we say, okay, this is the bottom range of the salary, 125, whatever the number is. I think 106 as an elected 3 is too low. I don't think you're going to draw anybody worth their salt to run for that. But if we moved it up a chain, so it's 125, that's their number for 4 years. They knew what they were running for. They get that number for 4 years. Unless there's a COLA, unless there's a COLA anytime which they would share in just like all employees, they run again 4 years later, get reelected, they get a 5% increase, and then that's their salary for the next 4 years.
So the only way I would agree to something like that is if you take away what they're getting right now every year, according to the formula. Could you explain that again, Corinne, so I make sure I'm right? And listen closely, Mr. Moody.
I believe what Councilmember Moody is proposing for newly elected, non-incumbent elected officials, they would only get the 5%. They would not be eligible for the annual increase.
Okay, but all right. But after they're elected, then the annual kicks in if they get elected 4 years later.
No, they never get it.
They never get it, just the 5%.
Only the people that currently are elected.
All right,
whatever.
okay, now I got you. That's only for the newly elected.
I'm going to go ahead and make my motion, and then, hold on, then we can continue to have discussion, I guess, after it's seconded. So if y'all bear with me, I'm
Let
going
me
to.
withdraw mine so that way
Okay,
you'll
thank
have-
you. Let me make this motion. I make this motion to update the pay plan for newly elected, non-incumbent officials taking office after this action of council to the following. Number one, the entry-level salary for newly elected, non-incumbent officials to be set at the minimum of the pay range for each position. These positions are the auditor, clerk of court, coroner, probate judge, register of deeds, sheriff, and treasurer. Number two, a newly elected, non-incumbent elected official who is re-elected to the same office without a break in service will receive a 5% increase at the beginning of the new term of office. This change will not impact elected officials currently in office. These officials will continue to be eligible for the annual increase based on the middle merit percentage. Number three, a newly elected non-incumbent official will be eligible for cost of living adjustments as approved by county council and is in the current pay policy. And then number four, to my point about the income, reclassify the auditor, coroner, register of deeds, and treasurer from elected 3 level to elected 4 classification. That's my motion.
What's the salary for elected 4?
Minimum is 125. Their elected 3 is 106 right
All
now.
right, and so what would be the minimum for the sheriff?
She doesn't change. She's a 5.
She's a 5. But I mean, what I'm saying, the newly sheriff would still be a 5. Now, what's that salary for newly sheriff at a 5?
148.
It would be
Okay.
148,408 for the
Okay.
sheriff. And
Goodness.
just, the sheriff would be the only position that would be elected 5. All the other elected officials would be 4, based on this motion.
All right, that's great, because we want to make sure we get a great person in office. That's fine.
That's my motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it.
Mr. Moody, too, do we have the authority in council if we know somebody's out there and we want to get that person more money to have them, we can do that, right?
In my opinion, Mr. Pryor, I think this gives us maximum flexibility. Okay, because if a new auditor comes in, Mr. Tecklenburg says, I'm done, a new auditor comes in, and that person, he or she is a CPA, and they're coming in at 125, this council would have the ability, in my opinion, Ms. Altenheim, correct me if I'm wrong, to say, you know what, we're going to start you at 135 based on your life experience and your education. Or if a new ROD came in, and she was an attorney, and we said, or had been appraising real estate for 30 years. And we said, you know, we're not going to start you at 125, we're going to start you at 132 because of your experience. I think this council has the total flexibility by having it in HR, but what it does is it just stops this ever-escalating salary train and people that have earned that salary train, new people coming in and getting it.
Ms. Ham, do we have the authority to do that before we pass this, or do we need to get the correct information before we make this choice?
Yes, sir. So I worked with Ms. Altenheim and the clerk and Mr. Moody in getting this particular
So
motion
you're
put
comfortable
together.
we can
Yes, sir.
elevate somebody for experience?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, got no problem with that.
Ms. Honeycutt?
So there were a couple points that I want to make sure I understand this motion. Did you say in part 2 that they get the bump on reelection, and then on part 3 they get the COLA?
I did. The 5% bump would be eligible only 4 years, and the cost of livings, how often do we do that, Ms. Altenheim?
Every year.
The last time we did a cost of living increase was in 2014. We haven't really done those much lately, but
It's not an annual thing.
No.
Okay. The other thing I want to just make clear every time we have this conversation is this does not apply to county council members, right?
Yes.
Okay. So just so the public knows, none of this applies to us. But I do see the value in this. I think long-term for the county, especially considering, you know, Mr. Kabrowski's point about the fringe benefits attached to these very high salaries. We have people that have dutifully served in office and have been rewarded by being reelected by the public. So this is unique in that the public is the one who gets to choose if those folks are doing a good job or not and put them back in office. And so I don't have any problem with someone who's rewarded by the public to retake that office. They're clearly doing a good enough job for the public to support them. So I think this is an appropriate way to manage their salaries so that there is some incentive to continue doing the job and doing it well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Price?
Question.
Yeah.
So when the administrator gives out the yearly compensation for evaluations, and, you know, like, we just got 3% and 4%, and I think elected officials receive the same thing, if I'm not, they didn't get anything? It's only the employee that works for you, sir? Okay, well, that's fine, as long as, because I know every year we give our employees, they get evaluation bonuses or raises of percent of budget.
Oh, that's only
So this does not include the elected officials, only the employees? Yes, sir. Okay, got it.
He has his hand up, and I'm going to call the question after this.
Thank you. Can I make an amended motion,
I
or?
don't know. Let's hear what you got to say, and I'll consider
So
it.
I think you brought up some excellent points. I'd like everything, but my motion would be the same, but to eliminate the COLA and the bump, in that, again, and I did some math, that the one who's making $125,000, there's like a $50,000 benefits every year they get, and at $142,000, it's almost $60,000. I would vote for what you did, to cap them, but this allow them to get whatever increase employees get for their benefits every year. But my motion is for what you want, but to eliminate the COLA and the bump on the basis that it's for the voters to decide. Nobody forces a public official to run.
I think I'd like to leave my motion as is, Mr. Kabrowski. I think what it does is by giving them the 4-year bump or COLAs as issued by the county, that lets the elected officials participate in pay increases where they normally are not getting any.
Respectfully.
I'd like to call.
One more point.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Kabrowski, everybody gets the 42% benefits.
Right.
Everybody gets that. So it's not like the elected officials are getting something special. If you're a county employee, your fringe benefits package is 42%.
I agree. I'm just saying that should be enough.
Right.
That's my point. Because that means your salary is actually much more, your benefits, than what your salary. That
Mr.
was
Sass, I'd like to call the question.
All right, Mr. Moody is moved by Mr. Moody, seconded by Mr. Boykin. Is there any further discussion?
You call the roll.
Have a roll call, please.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Darby?
I'm going to abstain for right now.
Mrs. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Mr. Kabrowski?
No.
Mr. Moody?
Aye.
Mr. Pryor?
Yes.
Mr. Werman? No. Mr. Sass?
Aye.
All right, the motion passes with 5 ayes, 2 nay, one absent.
Mr. Darby, are
And
you?
one abstention,
do you-
sorry.
You still want to abstain, Mr. Darby?
I do, sir. I like to do my own research. Not that I don't trust Mr. Moody, but I hadn't done enough research of my own, so I'm going to abstain, sir.
This will come back for another vote at the next council meeting, so,
No offense.
thank you. Okay, one other thing.
I'm working on it. I like to keep dripping on him.
Last thing today, Veterans Day is next day or so. Y'all are off tomorrow for the holiday. So we all want to remember to recognize our veterans. And also, this is Beverly Craven Day.
Amen.
We're blessed. Ms. Craven was an incredible person.
Amen.
We all-
That you was.
We'll all remember her forever. So, thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Amen. Amen.
Moody, don't talk about Mr. Darby Boston no more. He might have voted with you.
I'm doing the dirty work for him.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to make it,